more impressive than the Hedgehog I fought previously.
Dude, I'm standing right here.
You're a colorful bunch.
If you were to ask me to describe my thoughts on the Sonic movies in the simplest way possible, I would just show you this picture. And I'm only mostly joking. The first movie wasn't awful by any means, but it was really generic. Instead of taking advantage of the uniqueness the franchise has, what we get is just a standard cartoon character in the real world story, but with Sonic. Again, not awful, just generic. Fair's fair though, because it clearly did well with casual audiences, and come the second movie, the overall quality of the story and use of elements from the franchise goes way up. Are there still criticisms to be had? Sure. But Sonic 2 is a significant step up from the first movie, and it looks like the third movie is set to do the exact same thing. It helps that in spite of the changes, I think the characters overall are still pretty good. Sonic may not be exactly how I'd prefer him, but this more naive and vulnerable version of the character is still perfectly valid in his own right. I think it's pretty funny how Tails doesn't actually seem all that different from his game self, but Knuckles being way more literal-minded and serious about everything is a lot of fun. And, of course, there's Jim Carrey as Robotnik. Look, any feelings I have about the man as a person aside, his take on the character alongside lead Majob as Agent Stone is a lot of fun. Possibly the best character in these films. Although I say that with the caveat that Sonic 3 isn't out at the time of me making this, so who knows, maybe Keanu Reeves' Shadow will take that crown. Of course, as is usually the case with successful movie franchises, these films have their fair share of merchandise, which leads us to the subject of today's video, the Jakks Pacific 5-inch Sonic 3 line. Oddly enough, Jakks never made a line for the first film, probably because of Sonic being redesigned, and when they did for the second, it was a 4-inch line, so the switch to 5-inch is somewhat interesting. But trust me, a height change isn't the only thing different between these two lines. In fact, I think it's fair to say that this new line may have some of the best officially released Sonic action figures ever. How exactly? Let's get into it and find out. So to start things off, let's look at one of the 4-inch figures released for Sonic 2. It's a bit flimsy, but not too bad, right? Now, let's bring in one of the new 5-inch figures and... I mean, do I need to say anything? The sheer difference in quality is staggering. Everything has had a substantial upgrade. The sculpting of the fur, the shoes, the colors. This is such a step up from the previous line, you'd think it cost significantly more, but nope! $20 Canadian. That's how much they cost. Only $5 more than the 4-inch ones. Seriously, what an improvement. Obviously this also includes the head sculpts. They look amazing and are full of personality, but one detail I really want to point out is how the eyes are done. Typically the eyes would just be painted in, which would be completely fine, but here they've added in a piece of clear plastic in front to help it look more natural. This is actually something Jakks also did with the 5-inch Mario movie line. They even had it so there was a bit of an optical illusion where it would look like their eyes would follow where you were. But whereas those figures had a habit of looking a bit uncanny, these guys look far more natural. While we're at the heads, you may notice that Sonic has some translucent plastic in his quills. That's because this head is reused for a 4-pack release that has light-up effects stuck into it. It does stick out, but honestly not enough that it's really a problem. Of course, that isn't to say that these guys are perfect and have no flaws to them. I think the first sculpt on Tails is a bit overdone, not bad per se, but not as natural as the others. And of course, the one thing you may have already noticed at this point is the paint mishaps. It isn't too bad with stuff like Sonic's mouth here, but then you get cases like Knuckles' glove and Supersonic's nose, and yeah, those are pretty damn sloppy. When picking these guys up in stores, you may want to take a moment to check each one in the packaging to make sure you can reduce the chances of dealing with this problem. Yeah, I know, most collectors usually do that anyway, but not everyone who watches this is going to be a long-time collector, are they? Still, those problems aren't near enough for me to think that these guys don't look fantastic. Even the lack of accessories don't really bother me. Yes, I would have liked to have some, but given how much better these figures are, I don't really mind it in the slightest. Although I'm getting ahead of myself here, because we haven't even talked about the articulation yet. Now, the articulation on both the movie and game 4-inch lines are pretty basic overall. Given how cheap they are, this isn't really that big of a deal, but on the whole, the lack of thigh swivels, elbow swivels, and the like meant that your options for posing were pretty limited. Even the 5-inch line for Sonic Prime, while better, still had missing points. That is not the case with these guys, though. What we get here is basically Marvel Legends scale articulation, and they are all the better for it. Even going back and comparing them to other Sonic toy lines like the Jazzwares line, these have those beat. Granted, I say that with the self-awareness that I've never owned any of the Jazzwares figures, so maybe take this with a grain of salt, but just comparing the two from what I've seen of them, the Jakks ones are far better, having better joint integration with the sculpt and better range overall. Seriously, you have no idea how nice it is to have Sonic figures with T-jointed ball joints and thigh swivels, not to mention the torso movement. They even have opening hands! The thumb makes it look a bit awkward, I admit, but come on! Marvel Legends doesn't even have this! Admittedly though, these improvements are mostly seen in Sonic and Shadow. Knuckles can't really utilize the ball joint at the head due to his dreads getting in the way, and in spite of what I said earlier, Tails for some reason is stuck with the old hip joints and I have no idea why. You could have easily used the T-joint here. Why go back to this? It's so much worse. Still, this is a massive step up from what was previously done. I doubt this articulation will be finding its way into the 4-inch game line anytime soon, but man oh man do I hope it does, because these guys pose like absolute champs. Size comparison time, Sonic and Shadow are around 12 centimeters to the top of their heads. Knuckles is at 14 centimeters, and Tails is about 9.5 centimeters. Honestly, you could probably fudge these guys next to your Marvel Legends and they won't look too bad, but put them with anything that's a more true 1/12 scale and they'll start looking rather huge. It's possible to make it work, don't get me wrong, but odds are these guys will probably work best with 7-inch scale figures. At the end of the day, what else can I say? This line has what may be the best Sonic action figures officially released. Outside of Paint QC and the choice to not give Tails T-jointed ball joints at the hips, every other issue kind of falls to the wayside. These overall still look amazing, pose like absolute champs, and are only $5 more expensive than previous versions, which is still far cheaper than most retail action figures of this quality. If you're a Sonic fan, this is an easy purchase, and even if you're not a fan, I'd say give at least one of them a shot. Just get them when you can, because I can imagine them being hard to find in the future. But that's all I've got to say on these guys. What do you think? Do you think Jakks will make more 5-inch Sonic figures? I can see it happening with how good these are, but let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Oh, and by the way, I hope you guys like Optimus Prime, because you're going to be seeing him a fair bit this month. Later!